Manchester City's time at the top of English football looked all set to be over after Joe Mercer's retirement and Malcolm Allison's botched second attempt at the job. Then John Bond came in. These are the forgotten nearly men of Manchester City. Malcolm Allison was back by popular demand. The real team of the 80s was Manchester City, apparently. Allison came back with a mandate to make sweeping changes to the team. Brian Kidd was the first to go, and quickly thereafter names like Michael Robinson, Gary Owen, Peter Barnes and Asa Hartford quickly followed him, all without replacement. It's easy to say now, but armed with hindsight it's obvious that he shouldn't have returned. With Tony Buck upstairs as general manager, however, there ought to have been some yin and yang at Main Road to provide optimism. No, it was a cataclysmically bad start, kicking off with a drab loss at the Dell before Sunderland pitched up at Main Road and somehow found the net 4 whole times. It didn't get much better, City only finding reprieves with draws, first at home to the eventual league champions Aston Villa and then away to Middlesbrough. Ultimately, Malcolm Allison's second coming would end with 4 points from 12 matches, all winless, with City strewn to the bottom of the First Division table. Therefore, City simply had to go into the managerial market, and they came up smiling with John Bond. Bond had taken Bournemouth from a middling 4th tier position to inches from the second division, and gets the credit of changing the club's cumbersome Bournemouth and Boscombe athletic name to the cleaner AFC Bournemouth. He then went to Norwich, replacing Ron Saunders, took them to a League Cup final, got them promotion to the top flight as the Canaries punched above their weight. 1975 to 1980 finishing only between 10th and 16th, despite obvious financial restraints and a sporting history that had only seen them ply their footballing trade in the top flight for the first time in 1972. Despite being tied to an 8-year contract, Bond was prized from Norwich. Typically, they'd be lost without him, and he resigned for the City job. Norwich were relegated by the end of the season. For City, however, things started to look up.
And straight away, Steve McKenzie with a rifling shot and a chance for them to put him ahead.
Interfering with play in any sense, but here now is Reeves, and Reeves has scored!
All started with the visitors Spurs, a team that John Bond and City would become quite acquainted with greatly that season. Steve Daly, Steve McKenzie and Kevin Reeves got the goals in a 3-1 win over the North London club, whilst Dennis Stewart ran in 6 goals across 2 contests against Brighton in the league and Notts County in the League Cup. By the end of the year, just 2 blemishes laid against City's name, with the visits to Roker Park in November and to White Hart Lane 2 weeks out from Christmas. Ending 1980 with 3 victories on the spin, City had dredged themselves up to the safety of 13th place. Bond had rectified the business, or distinct lack thereof, from the summer, instantly bringing in Bobby McDonald and Tommy Hutchinson from Coventry City, with Bristol's Jerry Gow following shortly thereafter, and almost $250,000 flung towards Southampton for Phil Boyer. Such had City's fortunes drastically changed. John Bond was awarded the Bells Manager of the Month award for December, which we all know is the most hectic period of the English footballing calendar. Patchier form in the second half of the season wouldn't make his position much better, as City's form on the road took a dive, with league defeats at Villa Park, Highbury, the Victoria Ground, St Andrews Carrow Road and of course Portman Road. But league status had long been assured, plus they had good reason to be distracted into this inconsistency. The FA Cup run had provided solace and familiar foes on both sides. Malcolm Allison had returned to Crystal Palace after his second stint at City had gone awry, and in that guise he was allowed to return to Main Road for the 3rd round of the Cup, in which they were battered. Allison faced the end to another second coming down in South London shortly thereafter. John Bond got one over his former employers in the 4th round as City romped to a 6-0 win over Norwich, and by the time Peterborough were vanquished by a single goal on the road, Cup fever had swept right the way through Main Road. That only swelled after a gritty 2-2 draw at Goodison Park in the quarter-final.
In the replay at Main Road, a crowd of over 52,000 saw left-back Bobby McDonald assume the mantle of match winner. Second, a typical header, put City in charge. Just 5 months after taking over, John Bond had assured City's First Division safety and taken them through to the semi-final of the FA Cup.
The club was entirely written off against Ipswich Town, their opponents for the semi-final. Such was the mark of how things had changed. Bobby Robson's team were now the ones chasing the title, while City were the ones who were the innocent bystanders in the background feeding on scraps from cup competitions. Manchester City had qualified for the 100th FA Cup final with a goal in the 100th minute of the semi-final. Is that enough of an omen for the universe to demand that Manchester City were the centenary champions of the biggest cup competition in the world?
Oh, Ransom, Mike, with an early ball, played it there. And the goal by Hutchinson! And this probably is the first real opportunity he's had. He's about 20 yards out, he's well to the right of goal. Hoddle, turning it, an own goal by Hutchinson!
Manchester City and Spurs ended in stalemate. For the neutral fan and for those fond of nostalgia or compiling video edits of cup final history or from the White Hart of North London, thank Christ it did, because a replay again at Wembley would go down in history forever.
He's got a chance! Good save, Ricky Villa! Now Hutchinson to McKenzie! Oh, tremendous goal! The body is checking in, he was pushed, Houghton came in and finished it off, and here comes Reeves, and it's there! That's it for Archibald! Crooks! And still Ricky Villa! What a fantastic run! He scored! Amazing goal!
Manchester City started the 1981-82 campaign unbeaten, sneaking beyond West Brom on the opening day before returning from Nottingham with a point. Alright, it wasn't Forest they returned from with that valuable point, it was against Notts County. John Bond had spent the summer stewing over City's ailments in front of goal, and the 1-1 draw against County had confirmed it. They needed more firepower. Thankfully, Peter Swales matched the newfound ambition of the club first time for everything, as Trevor Francis was pulled from the back pocket and signed from Forest. Even better, they'd pipped United to this signature after they had the harebrained scheme of trading in with goal machine Gary Birtles, a player Forest had sold United only a year prior. Francis was derided as a waste of money as Britain's first £1 million player in his Forest debut a few years prior. His opening bout at City couldn't have gone much better, scoring twice, assisting the other in a 3-1 triumph over Stoke. Meanwhile, everything about the club just felt better. Martin O'Neill was signed from Norwich, Kevin Bond came in from Seattle, and Swales was even thinking of forking out for a multi-million pound renovation of Main Road.
Oregon touched it out by Clayton. Here's Archibald. Oh, what a touch, he's taken it in.
It's a day when defenders can take the greatest pride, Kevin Moran particularly for United.
Stewart puts it in front.
Reeves.
Stewart!
Not that Trevor Francis could stop City devolving into another mediocre and inconsistent first half of the season. For every thrashing of Leeds United in September, there was a disgraceful loss away on the south coast of Brighton 2 weeks later. For every thrashing of surprise package Swansea in November, there were the terrible away days in Ipswich and Birmingham either side of it. And even though they had been dispatched from the League Cup at lowly Barnsley and had gone down at Highbury and Portman Road again, there was a tinge of optimism heading into Christmas of '81. First, the reigning champions Aston Villa were defeated at Main Road, then Coventry were beaten a week later. But, take a drink, typical City, a surprise loss at home to Sunderland took the Blues into a seemingly unwinnable clash at Anfield on Boxing Day and a quick road to yet another barren winter. City were 7th on Christmas Day 1981, but hadn't won at Anfield since 1953, and the days of Les McDowell in the dugout and Johnny Hart banging in the goals on the pitch. Liverpool were the reigning champions of Europe. Manchester City had no right to win, but at least they'd be able to soothe their league title failures with the New Year's celebrations.
Well, for the cross to Hartford rather getting in and scoring a superb goal. Robillard goes up and drops it again, and that's a penalty. Thompson turning it over. Robillard made the mistake. And the shot comes to Whelan. Remington on the edge of the box. Reeves with a back flick, and it's gone in. And Robillard's misery is complete.
But that that wasn't going to be the case. City were the ones bouncing into the top 4 and Liverpool were in 12th place now. Swansea led the table, Ipswich in 3rd, Southampton 5th, with the Manchester clubs intertwined. This was a weird season, even weirder when you consider that United had been the lesser of the Manchester clubs in this time and were the ones earmarked as title favourites. And yet all wasn't great behind the scenes. Largely the short spells of Martin O'Neill and Jerry Gow ended primarily due to the club defaulting on a final payment for Kevin Reeves' $400,000 transfer. As 81 became 82, however, one thing that City hadn't skimped out on was undersoil heating at Main Road. In the midst of a particularly frostbitten winter, City were able to play on as others failed to get games on. After the Boxing Day triumph at Anfield, City only managed 3 games between then and the start of February, all of which were played at Main Road, as the Blues' good form continued through 5 points from 3 games, and finally an away day came and City nabbed another point from Upton Park to begin February. A point split the top 3, a championship led by Southampton, with both Manchester clubs split only by goal difference. Just ignore those games in hand by the more in form and the more experienced names of Ipswich, Arsenal and Liverpool firmly in the pack. A trip to the Dell was next.
Still comes to him, and now Shannon.
The chance to put Spurs into the lead, and he does so. For Ardiles free, and now Hoddle, not so free.
If that defeat down at Southampton wasn't yet the killer blow, thanks to a win against South Coast opposition a week later emphatically against Brighton, then another southerly loss might have just spurred on a typical Manchester City doom spiral. This being the first season of 3 points for a win meant City's 8-point deficit behind leaders Southampton, even in 7th, wasn't terminal just yet, as a trip to Old Trafford lay in the crosshairs. Then came the catastrophic run. Such a slew of injuries that City had suffered in the early spring might paint the next 6 matches as an unbeaten run, but a more probable realistic view is that another season was rendered over thanks to 5 draws from 6 and only a win away at Elland Road on March the 10th. And yet they retained an 8-point gap as they sat in 8th, except now the games were running out thick and fast. Except Liverpool, Ipswich and United all had 2 games in hand on them. And if you thought that the most recent run was bad, get a load of this old shit.
Lee. Oh, what a goal! Who's to take this penalty for Liverpool? Clayton again, and he's got free. Must go in. Johnston had to do. Still Kennedy. Oh, what a goal from Alan Kennedy! Oh, gives it back to Rush, and he's not offside. It's number 5.
This 7 days after City had chucked in an embarrassingly limp defeat at home to West Ham, and 2 days before a trip to Wolves where an even more spineless 4 were shipped at Molineux. A piss-poor Easter was then rounded up with another defeat away to Swansea. Wheels profoundly off the campaign, City lurched into neutral through a battling 4 unbeaten, drawing to teams of their day in Ipswich and Villa while scabbing 1-0 triumphs against Midlands counterparts West Brom and Notts County. Wrapping up the season with a couple of defeats meant 10th place, a bang average season for one that looked to have continued John Bond's great momentum that emanated from the cup final the prior year. Ultimately, Trevor Francis' time in Manchester would be cut short by injury and the country's first £1 million player would last just 1 year at Main Road, with only 10 league goals after his club debut. He departed for the unsuccessful 1982 World Cup with England as a City player, but exited it as a Sampdoria talent, with the Italians willing to pay £900,000, which greatly eased City's financial burden. With a bit more financial breathing room, City went in for a comparative spending spree. Southampton's Graham Baker in for $225,000, whilst David Cross came in from West Ham on a tribunal. Spurs' Chris Jones and Newcastle's Ian Davies were acquired on frees. More money would be promised. Saab spunked $400,000 at the club over 2 years to be on the front of City's shirt as a sponsor. Plus, everything simply looked a whole lot better in the ground, thanks to Main Road's main stand now having a new roof. Before we get into the weeds of a league season, we should probably just cover what had traditionally become a footnote in Manchester City's seasons. For those of a nervous disposition, look away now.
ball out. And there it goes in from pocket. Holmes made himself some room. Can he curl one? Yes, he can.
Case with the shot. It deflected and it's in. Go to Richie again. And a fine shot. Smiling will score. Nice skill. And a good ball too. And what a magnificent goal. Robinson.
Two quick exits from the cup, both with embarrassing 4-0 displays away on the south coast. With that out of the way, we can finally get into the positives of Manchester City's 1982-83 campaign.
Good football. Baker. Cross on the far post. And what a start for David Cross.
He placed along to the left, the pass maybe to him, but his power with the shot deflected, and a chance here surely, and it's tucked away by Baker.
David Cross turned out to be a bargain at 135 grand as he bagged crucial goals on his full debut at Norwich before his first main road bow against Stoke. More victories gleaned from Watford and then, even more impressively, at White Hart Lane. City now legged the league table in its embryonic state, clutching on to 12 points from 5 matches. Slowly but surely, those losses would begin to outweigh the triumphs. Their first defeat at Main Road on September the 18th against the European champions Aston Villa, before they shipped 4 yet again at Upton Park, before losing to Howard Kendall's Everton again to begin October. From such highs as leading the league in a strong start to now being tainted with a negative goal difference, all within 9 matches, they called it typical City. This was a Manchester City team you could set your watch by. And not in a good way either. The whiff of a successful season had been snuffed out, and after 26 matches, City occupied another aggressively average 10th place. That failed to tell the whole story. They were only 9 places behind leaders Liverpool, but trailed them by 22 points. They were 10 places above the relegation zone, but were only above it by 11 points. And then the season really got desperate, especially once John Bond resigned as manager.
To Gillespie. There's number 3. Well, we tempted to try one. He has done. Oh, what a goal!
Stapleton. And now there's trouble for Manchester City again. Armstrong. Byrne. And that's 3-0.
First was wrong in his judgment. McCall and now Walk.
Under the stewardship of John Benson, City hurtled down the league table at speed. Now they had just 8 matches left to be played and only a 5-point lead over Birmingham City, who occupied the relegation zone. One of the bigger problems now was everyone had a game in hand on the Blues. Their first triumph for nearly 3 months was next, a 2-0 win scabbed at the Hawthorns. It felt more like a death rattle, especially when Liverpool turned up to Main Road and played City completely off the park, and when Stoke followed that up by earning all 3 points 5 days later. Cobbling together the odd win was keeping City at arm's length from relegation, and a 2-0 triumph at home to West Ham, 7 points, were the difference ahead of the drop with 4 matches to play. Then Arsenal and Nottingham Forest delivered the predictable April sucker punch, and with clubs up and down the country getting through their games in hand, fate was no longer in Manchester City's hands. They could only boast a 1-point lead over Birmingham City and relegation, but the second City Blues had a game in hand still remaining. It would end positively for them as well, gaining a point at home to Brighton, which served to send the Seagulls to the bottom of the pile and dredge themselves out of the bottom 3. Now with everyone on a level playing field with 2 May encounters all to play, the cities of Birmingham and Manchester could only be split by 5 goals.
Back to Reeves, it may run on for Baker, or indeed for Power. McDonald now. Reeves with the flick. Oh yes! Kevin Reeves.
He's onside, can he finish? Also can. Waiting in the area, Fantasize can get the cross in. Up goes Harford, and it's gone in.
A gut punch that a relegation rival could get a win out of a team as esteemed as Spurs was quickly redeemed as a good day when news of Luton Town's 5-1 capitulation at home to Everton was revealed. Now Luton had a game in hand in the final week of the season, but City were out of the drop zone for now, and for once, United did something good for their neighbours, a Paul McGrath double helping sink Luton 3-0 ahead of the final day of the season. It left things as you were heading into the final game. As high as Sunderland in 15th could still be plunged into the mire. It just so happened that the final game of the First Division would be Manchester City versus Luton. A positive that City could afford to draw, but in a fight to the death, you never want to be met eye to eye with something more desperate to survive than you are.
Again, and he gets the cross in, and Williams has got Antish! Oh, he's there! They've done it! Rani Antish!
The final day of their previous life in the second division was a celebratory 0-0 draw all the way back in May 1966. The first day of their new life in the second tier, a trip to Crystal Palace won by a couple of goals. The veneer of Manchester City of being a huge club continued to be stripped away in the 1980s as they bounced to and from the first and second tiers like some kind of sordid seesaw. We were a long way from the comfort of league titles and silverware under Joe Mercer, which you can reminisce about with this video.